You know I will. I love making TBRs that I can't commit to. The next book disappointed me so bad. What's up guys, it's that time where I inform you of all the books I recently read. So hi, I'm Jessica Nicole Dickerson and welcome back to another video. So it's been a minute since I've done a recent reads. I normally would do monthly wrap-ups, but this year has been so crazy, as everyone knows, and I hope everyone's safe. So I haven't been staying on top of doing monthly wrap-ups, and the last recent reads I did, I'll link up below, or link up above. That's the phrase I was trying to aim for saying. So I'll link that last video. I think it was like 3 months ago that I told you guys about the books that I read. So I'm definitely behind and I have a lot of books to cover. I think I actually have more than 20 books to tell you about, just because I literally read like 17 volumes of a certain manga that I'm going to rave about very quickly, and I'm gonna try and keep it short. And yes, the lighting is gonna change a bazillion and one times, because as you can see behind me, there's tons of windows behind me and there's tons of windows in front of me. So you're gonna hear Mother Nature chirping in the back. You're gonna see the sun rise and fall behind the clouds. You know, Hawaii has its own rules for light. So forgive me. Hopefully you guys can hear me well. Yeah, but let's get into all the books I recently read in the last 3 months. Still recent, pretty recent. The first manga I'm going to talk about, and I think it's the only manga that I read so obsessively. I read volumes 7 to 23 of Yona of the Dawn in the month of March. So if you don't know, that is a popular anime, but it was first a manga, and the manga series is still ongoing. So I'm as far possible into the series as humanly possible, and honestly I kind of want to give the series 5 stars, but I'm gonna give it 4. I should just give it 5. So this series, Yona of the Dawn, is about a prissy princess who is kind of spoiled, and she grew up with her father. Her mother died when she was very young, and her father is very cowardly in the eyes of the commoners of his actual like army. In the literal first volume, not a spoiler, this is the premise of the story, the father, the king of the kingdom, is murdered by Yona's first love interest, who is this prince that she wanted to marry. So her father gets murdered and she has to escape the palace from her supposed love interest, who she's wanted to marry since she was a little girl. She leaves the palace with her personal guard, Hawk, who also is a childhood friend, and I'm gonna get so whitewashed because of the sun. But yeah, so the two of them, Hawk and Yona, flee the palace, and they go on this journey to find the 4 dragons to kind of protect Yona and Hawk from, you know, enemy forces. This book is so political. If you like historical fiction, and then on top of that, so you like historical fiction, you will also enjoy the fact that there is some romance in this. Hawk and Yona for days, oh my god, they are so cute, because Hawk has he's literally so funny. Like in the beginning, Yona is kind of prissy and like doesn't know how to fish or do anything, and Hawk knows everything, and he's like the best warrior ever, and he has to protect her. And he's just so funny because he bashes her so heavily. At first he's like, yeah, you're ugly, so what? And it's just that funny humor that turns into, you know, that romance that's very like filled with tension, and it's such a slow burn, such a slow burn. I'm so obsessed, and the art style is so beautiful. So I can't rave about it enough. I hope you guys check it out. Please do. Go do it. Moving on to the next book that I read, A River of Royal Blood by Amanda Joy. So I don't have the copy with me. I got an ARC from Penguin Teen a while ago, and I finished this book in March, I believe. And yep, it's a story about sister heirs or rival heirs, because when you're born from the royal family, you grow up and you have to fight each other for the throne. Real crazy. And it's a queendom too, which is exciting. But basically one of the sisters, the younger sister, has the most powerful blood in the kingdom. Like her blood magic is the most powerful and most scary, but she doesn't know how to wield it, so people think she's not gonna make it, that she's gonna die, she's not gonna make it past her like 16th birthday, because that's when her and her sister have to duel. The politics is so amazing in this book. So I gave this one a 4.5 star or 4.7. It's very close to a 5 star. It's just missing that obsession that comes with a 5 star where you can't stop thinking about it. But I thoroughly enjoyed that fantastical world, the political elements. There was a little bit of romance that wasn't totally necessary, but it was like a cute touch. Like, I didn't need that, but okay, cool. So yeah, I highly recommend that book too. You should definitely check it out. The next book I read, I did make a complete dedicated vlog to it, so it's Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi. I gave this book a 3 star. It's a little bit of a disappointment because I did highly anticipate this book. I really enjoyed the first book. I gave the first book 4 stars. What I didn't enjoy about the first book is that it focused a lot on the romance, but I really enjoyed the story of like the journey and the magical elements in the world itself. I could see myself in this world and it was really cool. So that's why I gave the first one 4 stars, and I kind of was like, okay, the romance, not my favorite, but I could totally see how people love it. So objectively, I'm like 4 star. Okay, cool. So the second book, I was like, yes, we're going to fix this. We're going to get into it. There's going to be a lot of action. And I found that this second book kind of suffered from middle book syndrome because it was interesting because it was shorter than the first book, but I feel like it felt longer than the first book because there wasn't as much going on, and the plot kept relying on the fact that the 2 main girls, Zelly and Amari, kind of feuded a lot on their opinions, which is expected. They both come from different like class standards or backgrounds, and it makes sense, but I just feel like it was overused, and it made women feel very like catfighty, in my opinion. That's what I got from it, and I'm like, I didn't enjoy it, and I think a lot of the conflict stemmed from that specific angle, and it wasn't enticing. I was a little bored and I was underwhelmed, which makes me so sad. But what I still like is the world, and I still felt connected to the characters. There was one character in particular that died during this book, and I felt like crying because I really enjoyed his presence, and so that's why it's still a 3 star. It's still like a good read, but it just didn't tickle my fancy. It's definitely not a 5 star or 4 star because I'm not in love, and I don't know if I'd reread it anytime soon. But I did still love some of the characters. I just didn't like some of the choices in the plot devices, if that makes sense. But the world is still really cool. So yeah, if you want to check out that blog, you should do so. Okay, the next book, I finally have a physical copy of it so I can show it off. So the next book I managed to finish, and I believe I finished this in April? Who knows? I've lost any concept of time whatsoever, but I finished A Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. So I really enjoyed what is it called? I think it's called An Enchantment of Ravens. Her first book, her debut book. The writing style is just so beautiful, and I enjoyed the story. It was a fae romance story, so I really loved it. So when she came out with this, I knew I had to get it, so I waited until it was available on Book Outlet for very cheap. So I finally got a cheap copy. She a little marked up, but who cares, because the book and its content is so beautiful. So this is a story all about a girl who's growing up to being a librarian, and in this world, I don't know if it's called a librarian, I forget the exact job title. Basically, in this world, there's magicians and people who have magic, and there are books that a lot of older magicians like stuffed magic into, and some of it is like really bad magic, and those books can turn into creatures and like wreak havoc and kill people. And also this world is connected to this like demon world, and mages or magicians have to connect themselves to demons to be like more powerful. It's crazy. This book is crazy, and this girl is training to be a librarian to kind of look over the books. Things just go awry, and it's so fun. It's such a journey. So there's a lot of politics because she ends up kind of getting taken into this crazy world outside of her library because she's also an orphan, and having to fend for herself and protect herself, but not really knowing how to do that. And this guy who's like a magician, and he's also like lost his parents, is like too cool. And they have a romance, and I so ship it because it's not like one of those forced loved. I feel like it wasn't insta love. It was definitely like gradual, but it had that comedic timing that just made you like, ooh, you felt the tension and you feel the romance, and you just you just start to love them, you know. And I really appreciated the fact that this was longer than her previous book. Her previous book was, I think, almost under 300 pages, and this one is almost 500, and it gave you a lot more time to really just vibe the romance and vibe the world and the complexity. And I also really love a metaphor I always use for good books is the Mission Impossible metaphor, where it's like, this is the same story, obviously there's a problem and we need to fix it, but you keep watching it because it's different every time. The conflict and how to solve it and how people approach it and their reaction and everything changes. So I really appreciated this because of the complexity of solving the issue and figuring out the issue, for one, because they also had no idea what was happening for half the book. They're like, something bad's gonna happen, and they're trying to uncover it. There was just so much detail that went into this. It was so good. It's so good. I couldn't recommend this enough, and her writing style is just so lyrical. And the next thing I read was a comic book, which I gave 4 stars. It's probably more like a 3.7 because it's not really perfect, but I did enjoy it enough where if they come out with another volume, I totally check it out. So it is Sabrina, the Teenage Witch, and I think it's by Kelly Thompson. So the illustration style is just such a classic. Like, the coloring is so beautiful. I really love the artistic style. The vibe it gave was very Sabrina the Teenage Witch vibes. It kind of feels more like the Netflix show, if anything, not like super horror. Like, this is not the comic book that follows the TV show at all, because this is definitely, I feel like, less horror, less gory, but it has the same feel where it's like teenage witchy and they're in danger and there's all this bad things happening. So if you already know Sabrina's story, it's basically that she's going to high school and she has magical powers and she's trying to be a normal teen, and of course magic gets in the way. So it's very fun. Definitely a good quarantine read, if I do say so myself. The next book I managed to finish was Only Mostly Devastated by Sofia Gonzalez, I believe is the author's name. I'll put a picture up. But I got this on NetGalley and I finally got a chance to get around to reading it. It is a Grease retelling and it is queer inspired because the main couple is gay. So instead of having a girl and a boy, you know, have that summer romance, it was a boy and a boy. You know, the story of Grease is like, oh, the boy who, or the character who is about to go back home and like be away, like their summer romance ends up going to the school of the love interest. But I really appreciated the fact that this story took such a turn on Grease because of course it was a gay couple and they focused a lot on coming out culture, the fear of it, how to manage a relationship around that. And also I like the friend groups because it also talks about how transitioning to a new school, creating new friends, the problems with that, trusting people with your sexuality and other people having issues with their sexuality. I also really enjoyed the main girl friend group. At first it was very problematic, they were very nasty to each other, but as the story progressed you kind of understand them and they become more complex, and I just feel like all the characters in this book were so complex and I really enjoyed it. And also it talked a lot about grief because there is a family member going through a really traumatic time because she is going through cancer and cancer treatments with the family, and the main character is dealing with that and trying to help his aunt and take care of her kids, and he's also trying to follow his dreams of music. And there's just a lot of elements that were really fun to this, so I definitely gave this a 4.5. Basically a 5-star. It did miss that magical touch of a 5-star, but it was close enough to it where I was like, wow, you're a 4.5. There's just some bickery elements between the teens that weren't really necessary, but I did really like a lot of the elements, especially coming out as a queer person. I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend it. The next book I managed to read is a hyped book, and I'm finally happy that I got around to reading it, and that is The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. So we all know about The Cruel Prince here on Booktube. She hyped, she talked about, we all thrive and love / some of us hate, and that's okay. It's polarized. People love it or hate it. You know, I am one of the people who love it. I gave this a 5-star. I thought this was the perfect conclusion to the story. The story is about a few girls, like sisters, who were growing up in the like human world, our world, and when they were young, a fake king came in and killed their parents and kidnapped them because one of the kids is actually half his, and he felt betrayed and came over and just kidnap them, swap them into the fairy world. That's not a spoiler, that's literally in the first 2 pages of The Cruel Prince. And then they have to survive in this fae world where there's a lot of rules. And if you just like fae books, I feel like this is great. It has a lot of politics. The second book wasn't totally my favorite, but I really enjoyed the third book, this book, because it talked a lot about the politics. I totally saw how the riddle would be solved in the second book. There was this kind of conclusion that, ooh, the sun. Ooh. The second book left off on this note of banishing a certain character, and I knew how it was gonna be solved. It was in his words, and I was like, I can see how we're gonna fix this, and I was totally right. I was so ecstatic about that. So yeah, I enjoyed the politics a lot in this book. Their romance is still questionable because it's just weird a little bit, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people agree, how he goes from bullying to her to something else. So the romance in here is questionable, but I do really like the fae world. I really like Jude as like a complex, like messed up character. She's really nifty. I love characters that are like that. So if you like complex, morally gray, like super badass characters, you'll definitely like this trilogy. And I thought that the conclusion was great, especially if you like politics. The focus on politics was really nifty. The next book disappointed me so bad. So like last summer, I got into this phase where I read Ash Princess. This trilogy is the Ash Princess and Lady Smoke, and the third book, Amber Queen. And I kind of understand why now I don't like this book so much, because I feel like this book is so heavy compared to the other books. There's a lot of loss, there's a lot of military exploits where it's like we're strategically going to lose people because we need to save the majority kind of stuff, and it's just a lot of sadness with not a lot of joy. So I think that's why this wasn't as great as a story as I felt Ash Princess was, because it was very much about her self-development, her becoming brave and believing in herself and believing in her people and wanting to fight for them again. And then this one, it was all about the fight. And I felt the second one, even there was some humorous moments and a little bit more, and there was a lot of backstabbing, a lot of like things where she was developing as a character, becoming more badass and more, you know, she would do more. And then here it's just, I felt like it had a lot to do with military conflicts and what's the best for the majority kind of talk, which made me, like, I appreciate it objectively, super interesting, but personally I felt like it really detached me from the story, made me very sad, especially with the state of the world. I'm like, I don't really want to think about mass death right now. But overall, I think the trilogy is really powerful. I gave this, what did I give this? I gave it a 3.5. So it's still a good read. I just think you have to be in the right mindset, and I think this is a series that's better to binge because I kind of read it as they were published. So I feel like some of the fun characteristics that I liked in the first one and the second one were kind of lost in the third one because we focused all about the world and not so much on the characters anymore. So the next book that I managed to finish was A Torch Against the Night. So I definitely finished this last month in April. Spent most of the month reading it, to be honest. I was very bad with my TBR, and let's be honest, I failed the owls horribly. But will I still be participating in the newts? You know I will. I love making TBRs that I can't commit to, but I just make because I want to motivate myself, but then fail horribly and make myself sad. So I read A Torch Against the Night. So this is the second book in, I think, a quartet. I don't know how long the series is going to be, but the first book was An Ember in the Ashes, and I read that actually 2 years ago, which is insane. But I definitely still remembered a lot of the content from it because it's such a really interesting story. We have Laya, who is a part of that lower class, and in the first book she kind of loses her family and her brother gets imprisoned, and there's this mass group who are like marshals. They like go out and kill people and do investigations and stuff and work for the kingdom, and there's just this crazy political world that I think is so interesting because it looks like a lot of people don't really like this hierarchy, but they die for that loyalty, for that you have to be in this role, you have to live this life. And then on top of that, there's this like magical element of these, like, I don't want to call them demons, but they're like otherworldly creatures, and you kind of learn more about them in the second book, but they're introduced in the first book and you're like, what the fuck are you? it's very complex, very interesting. So if you like politics and you like a little bit of romance, because I know the first book had a little bit more romantic tension, and then in this book there's also a decent amount of romance, and it's in betrayal, which was so good. I love me a good betrayal, you know. Tasty. So I definitely recommend this. I gave this book a 4-star, I believe. Yes, a 4-star. And then another book that I managed to read is The Actor's Survival Guide, or The Actor's Life, a Survival Guide by Jenna Fisher. So we all know Jenna Fisher from The Office, and basically this is such a great book, especially if you are interested in the film industry or as an actor specifically, because you kind of feel like everything's on pause now. This is a great book to pick up right now because everything kind of feels paused right now, but then you also learn about her journey, how long it took, that everyone's journey is different. So it's very motivational and has so many practical tips that I really enjoyed, and I honestly might make a second review solely for actors if you're interested, because it just has a lot of tidbits. Okay, and then one of the last books I managed to read for, what was that month? April, was the Brown Girl Book Club pick, which was Let Me Hear Orion by Tiffany D. Jackson. So I have a whole like hour-long live show where I spend like 30 minutes in the later half talking about how amazing this book is. Basically, this is a 5-star read. I feel like it was so fun, but it talked about a lot of topical issues. Basically, this book is about Steph, who is a young boy who gets murdered, and his sister and his 2 best friends decide to take his music tapes, his like mixtapes, and make CDs and promote him and try and get him to be kind of almost a celebrity, or like just get people to listen to his music, because they feel like his life is cut short and that's unfair. And there's a lot of kind of mystery aspects. We don't know why he dies, we try and figure it out, and it also has a little romance between the characters, and it was just such a topical book. But again, I talk extensively about it during our Brown Girl Book Club live show, so you should check that out if you want to hear more details. But it was a 5-star read. It was so good. And then the last book that I read was When You Were Everything, and I don't remember exactly who the author was, and the sun's coming back to blind us. So that was the last book I managed to read, and I gave it a 4.5. It's kind of almost a 5-star, only because of the message that it gives, and I think that's so important to me, because a book you want to, like, I feel like you either really love a book because you just love the story and you want to reread it often and be in that world or be with that character, or you really enjoy the message of it. So kind of like Let Me Hear Orion, I really loved the message of it, and I did love the characters, and I thought they were really fun, and it's a story I'd reread. When You Were Everything, I don't think I'd personally reread it often, but I really like the story of moving on from friends, and it's such a topical story because everyone goes through that during high school, middle school, elementary school, when you grow out of a relationship, and also during high school. In particular, this story talks about a friendship between 2 girls during high school, and it just gets really nasty, and I feel like that happens a lot, and it doesn't make the girls feel catty towards the end. You understand where everyone came from and how it just kind of went wrong, and how like you have to learn and grow from these experiences so you don't repeat them, and how, you know, your friendships will change over time. I just think that's such a beautiful message. But I didn't really appreciate the fact that there was a love interest that kind of supported her through this transition, and I feel like not everyone actually has that, but it was cute, and it was a nice fun element that made it a little bit easier to read, because it is a heavy topic, losing friends and feeling alone, and she has also recently lost her grandmother, so there's a lot going on, and I liked all the elements. I just feel like when it comes to the reality of the situation, when people are in this losing a friendship, you might be more alone than how this girl was in the book, and she kind of took for granted the friends and the boyfriend, not boyfriend, but the boy who was a friend, for granted a little bit. So that element was questionable. I feel like it could have been implemented better, but it didn't take away from the story, not too much anyway. It didn't take away from my personal enjoyment, so I think that's why I'm leaning more towards a 4.7 out of 5 stars. I know I'm being very particular. I'm trying to be more kind of anal about my 5 stars, just because I just want them to be a little bit more like cherry on top. But yes, I did really enjoy this book. I thought it was a really important message that I feel like a lot of younger people will really appreciate. I feel like no matter what age, you kind of go through that transition of understanding that people move on, but then at the same time, it adds that element in this story about how girls can be so mean to each other throughout high school and be kind of pinned against each other, and how to grow out of that and how to mature from that, you know? Okay, I've been talking for like 5 billion years, so I really hope you enjoyed this video. It was so long, but I hope you maybe add some books to your TBRs. Thank you guys so much for watching. It means the world to me, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye. The sun is shining so bright. Oh my god.